That morning, I left the apartment a little later than usual. I hadn't eaten breakfast, barely ran a brush through my hair, and forgot the umbrella I always kept by the door. But none of that seemed to matter. The moment I stepped outside, I stopped for a breath. The air was crisp, and for the first time in weeks, the spring sunshine broke through the endless gray clouds that had hung over Portland like a heavy curtain. It was warm, not the suffocating heat of summer, but a gentle kind of warmth, the kind that wrapped around my shoulders like a soft shawl, whispering that maybe, just maybe, today wouldn't be so bad. I picked up my pace, clutching my tote bag, checking the time on my phone. Only 2 minutes left before my shift at the pharmacy began. Thankfully, it was just a few blocks away, tucked neatly between a family bakery and an old hardware store. As I walked down Hawthorne Boulevard, I noticed tiny buds pushing through the gray branches of winter, birds chirping with unusual boldness. Strangers exchanged smiles. It felt like the whole world had exhaled. "Good morning. You're glowing today," my coworker Lisa said as soon as I pushed open the door. I laughed lightly. Let's see if the customers let me keep that glow. I slipped into my white coat and headed to the counter, ready for the morning rush. The usual parade of elderly regulars stocking up on prescriptions just in case. I didn't mind. There was a rhythm to it, and I liked knowing I was helping people. Then my phone rang. I excused myself, thinking it might be Michael, but when I answered, an unfamiliar, deep male voice greeted me. "Hello. Is this Julia Dawson?" "Yes." "Who's calling?" "This is Brian Simmons. I'm Michael Dawson's supervisor." The smile on my face vanished instantly. My chest tightened. "What happened?" I asked. "There was an accident at the site. Your husband was hurt. He's been taken to Portland General." My heart dropped so hard I could barely speak. "Is he alive?" "Yes. But you should get there now." I didn't even hang up properly. My hands trembled as I turned to Lisa. "I have to go. It's Michael. There's been an accident." She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Go, I'll cover for you." And just like that, the sunshine disappeared. The drive to Portland General felt endless, though the streets blurred past my window without meaning. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel. The words replayed in my head like a broken record. Your husband was hurt. Hurt how? Hurt where? Why was he even on a job site? Michael was an architectural designer. He spent his days drafting plans, debating with clients, fighting zoning permits, not hauling drywall or climbing scaffolding. None of it made sense. By the time I burst through the automatic glass doors of the ER, my lungs were burning, my legs shaking. At the reception desk, I barely managed to say his name. "Michael Dawson. I think he was just brought in." The nurse nodded. "He's in surgery. Trauma team took him back about 30 minutes ago." "Surgery." I sank into the nearest chair like the floor had vanished beneath me. My ears buzzed, my heart pounded so hard I couldn't hear the rest of her words, something about signing forms and waiting upstairs. I nodded numbly, signed whatever they gave me, and followed blindly. And then came the silence, that awful, endless hospital silence, the kind that makes every tick of the clock sound like a drumbeat. I sat alone in a beige waiting room, surrounded by plastic chairs and a humming vending machine. Every 5 minutes, I checked my phone. Every 10, I stood to look down the hallway. 2 hours passed. Then 3. Finally, a man in scrubs walked toward me. His shoulders sagged, his hair was flattened under his cap, and his eyes were bloodshot behind his glasses. "Mrs. Dawson?" I stood so quickly, the chair nearly toppled over. "Yes, I'm here. Is he?" "He made it through surgery," the doctor said gently. "Your husband suffered a serious spinal injury. A large section of construction material collapsed and struck his lower back. Will he be okay? Will he walk?" The doctor hesitated, and I saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. "We stabilized him. We relieved the swelling. That part went as well as we hoped, but it's too early to know about long-term mobility. There's a chance of paralysis. My mouth opened, but no words came. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there frozen, staring at him like maybe, if I waited long enough, he'd take it back. He's resting now. We'll know more when he wakes. He offered me a small, practiced smile. I nodded, somehow managed to thank him, and when he turned away, I finally collapsed into the chair and broke. My hands covered my face, tears rushing hot and merciless. The sunlight I had noticed that morning felt like it belonged to another lifetime. That evening, when I finally returned home, the apartment felt unusually quiet, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I dropped my keys onto the counter, slipped off my shoes, and was halfway to the kitchen when I noticed something out of place. The faint murmur of voices drifting from the living room. My heart skipped a beat. At first, I thought maybe I'd left the television on that morning in my rush, but no, this was different. The voices were hushed, intimate, carrying a rhythm that instantly set my nerves on edge. I moved cautiously, each step deliberate, my mind racing. As I approached the living room doorway, I froze. There they were. Mark, my fiancé, and Chloe, my best friend, sitting far too close together on the couch. Their heads leaned toward each other, their laughter low, almost conspiratorial. For a moment, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The sight hit me like a blow to the chest, and I felt the air rush out of my lungs. My fingers tightened around the edge of the wall as though holding on to it might keep me from collapsing. Chloe noticed me first. Her eyes widened, her lips parting slightly, but she didn't move away from him. Mark followed her gaze, and when his eyes landed on me, he stiffened. The room fell silent. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. The tension was suffocating. Finally, I found my voice, though it trembled when I asked, "What's going on here?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair as though searching for a plausible excuse. "Julia, it's not what it looks like," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. But of course, it was exactly what it looked like. Chloe, always, more brazen, tilted her chin slightly and said, "Julia, you're overreacting. We were just talking, that's all." Her tone was calm, almost dismissive, but the guilt flickering in her expression betrayed her words. My heart pounded violently, every beat echoing in my ears. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but instead, I stood frozen in the doorway, gripping the wall so tightly my knuckles turned white. Betrayal has a peculiar way of numbing you, rendering you motionless, unable to react in the way you always imagined you would if faced with such a moment. "I see," I whispered, my voice barely audible, though the silence of the room carried it clearly. I turned away before the tears in my eyes could fall in front of them. Without another word, I walked past the kitchen, down the hallway, and into the bedroom. I closed the door behind me, pressing my back against it, and finally, let the tears spill freely. My chest heaved as sobs broke through, raw and uncontrollable. The man I had trusted with my heart, and the woman I had considered a sister, both of them had betrayed me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my relationship with Mark, and every conversation with Chloe. Suddenly, small signs I had dismissed as paranoia began to make sense. The way Mark sometimes seemed distracted when I spoke, the occasional inside jokes between him and Chloe, the lingering glances I'd brushed off as harmless. My mind wove them together into a painful tapestry of truth I had been too blind to see. The next morning, Mark tried to talk to me, his voice tinged with guilt, but I couldn't bear to hear his excuses. I simply told him I needed space. Chloe, on the other hand, sent me a string of messages, each one more desperate than the last. "Julia, please don't be mad at me. You're misunderstanding what you saw. I would never hurt you like that. But her words rang hollow. I had seen enough with my own eyes to know the truth. Over the following days, the weight of betrayal sat heavy on my chest, pressing, down until it was hard to breathe. Yet amid the heartbreak, a strange calm began to take root inside me. I realized that I didn't need to scream or confront them dramatically. Not yet. Instead, I would wait, watch, and plan. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon. And so, I carried on with my routine, outwardly composed, inwardly shattered. Neither Mark nor Chloe knew the storm I was quietly preparing, the storm that would eventually change everything. I sat frozen in that sterile hospital room, the faint hum of machines filling the silence between us. My mind was a battlefield, torn between grief and rage. How dare David stand here speaking to me as if nothing had happened, as if our marriage hadn't been shredded by lies and betrayal? The weight of everything crashed down on me. The years I had given him, the love I had poured into us, the loyalty I had guarded like sacred ground, only to realize that he had been sharing pieces of himself with someone else, with her. My chest tightened with the sting of humiliation. But beneath it all, an ember of defiance began to burn. I refused to let him see me broken. I lifted my chin, my voice calm yet edged with steel. Save your apologies, David. They're not for me anymore. Whatever life you were building in the shadows, go live it. Just don't come crawling back when it collapses. His face hardened, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I used to know. A man torn between two worlds, struggling to hold on to both but destined to lose them in the end. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then shut it, his jaw tightening as silence swallowed us whole. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me in the heavy emptiness that lingered behind him. The weeks that followed were a blur of chaos. News of David's betrayal spread like wildfire through whispers in the community, through sidelong glances that pierced me in the market, through hushed voices that went silent whenever I entered a room. I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing against me. Not pity, not comfort, but curiosity, the cruel kind that feeds on scandal. Even in my workplace, colleagues shifted uncomfortably around me, conversations halting mid-sentence when I walked by. I became both the victim and the spectacle, trapped in a spotlight I never asked for. But what none of them knew was that in my private silence, I was piecing myself back together. Night after night, I stood at my window, staring into the vast darkness, promising myself that I would rise from this wreckage, not just survive it, but conquer it. I began documenting every detail of David's betrayal. Every transaction, every hidden trail of money that tied him to his secret life. With the help of a quiet but sharp lawyer, I built a case so strong that when the divorce papers were finally served, there was no room left for him to twist the narrative. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one in control. Yet control did not erase the ache. Memories of us, laughing in the kitchen, dancing barefoot to songs we loved, whispering dreams into the dark, haunted me in fragments. But each time those memories surfaced, I reminded myself, that man never truly existed. He was a mirage, and I had been chasing him through the desert of deceit. The true test came when I saw him again, weeks later, not in some intimate corner or private room, but in the cold formality of the courtroom. David walked in with Holly on his arm, her smugness stitched into every step she took. My heart clenched, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I wore my strength like armor. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood, my voice steady, my eyes locked on David. This marriage is not ending because of miscommunication or growing apart. It is ending because of betrayal, dishonor, and deceit. And though you tried to strip me of dignity, I am walking away with my soul intact. That is something you will never reclaim." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the judge paused, his gaze lingering on me with something that felt almost like respect. David looked down, unable to meet my eyes, while Holly's smirk faltered ever so slightly. In that moment, I realized something profound. Betrayal may wound you, but it cannot define you, not unless you let it. That night, as I returned to an empty home, I finally allowed myself to breathe freely. For the first time in months, I slept without waking to the torment of nightmares. The path ahead was uncertain, yes, but it was mine. And though the scars would remain, they were no longer marks of shame. They were proof that I had survived fire and emerged unburned. But what I didn't know then was that the story was far from over. Because sometimes the past has a way of clawing back into your present, dragging secrets with it that you never imagined could exist. And David's betrayal? It was just the first layer of a much darker truth waiting to surface. Days began to blur together after that confrontation. I went to work, came home, and barely spoke to Daniel. Every time I saw his face, I felt like I was staring at a stranger, someone I once loved but could no longer recognize. The betrayal had carved a canyon between us, and no matter how many times he tried to explain or apologize, I couldn't bring myself to listen. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the ease with which he lied, the way he had let me believe I was paranoid when deep down I had sensed something was wrong. He had stolen my trust, and with it, the version of myself that believed in him so completely. Tessa, on the other hand, tried reaching out to me, sending long texts filled with excuses and half-baked apologies. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she wrote. "It was a mistake. Please don't throw away our friendship." But I couldn't even bring myself to respond. Every word from her felt like poison, and I was unwilling to let her back into my life. Betrayal from a stranger is painful, but betrayal from someone you considered family, that's a wound that festers. One evening, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror staring at my reflection. My eyes looked hollow, my skin pale, my expression lifeless. I realized then that I had been drowning in silence, letting their betrayal define me. Daniel and Tessa had broken my trust, yes, but I was giving them power by letting their actions consume me. That night, I decided things had to change. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't even try to force them to see the pain they caused. Instead, I would rise quietly, rebuild myself, and make choices that centered on my healing rather than their guilt. So I began making small changes. I picked up my old journal, the one I hadn't written in for years, and started pouring my emotions onto paper. At first, the words were jagged and bitter, filled with anger and grief, but slowly they softened into reflections of resilience. I started waking up early to jog, using the cool morning air as a way to clear my thoughts and reclaim my strength. I even joined a weekend art class, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. Each brush stroke on the canvas felt like stitching my soul back together. Meanwhile, Daniel noticed the shift. He'd come home to find me painting or writing, and he'd hover in the doorway like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. One night, he finally spoke. "I can see you changing. You're different, stronger." His voice cracked, and though a part of me pitied him, I didn't let it show. I simply said, "That's because I had no other choice." His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't rush to comfort him. Not this time. My healing wasn't about him. It was about me. The more I grew, the clearer my decisions became. Divorce papers were quietly prepared, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Staying with him would mean staying in the shadow of betrayal, and I refused to let my life shrink into something so small. I didn't tell him right away, though. Instead, I waited watching how he carried his guilt, how he tried to win me back with small gestures, flowers on the table, dinner cooked at home, promises whispered in the dark. But every attempt felt hollow because trust, once broken, doesn't come back with roses or words. Then came the day I finally told him. We were sitting across from each other at the dinner table, the silence heavy as usual, when I slid the papers across to him. His eyes widened, his fork clattered against the plate, and he whispered, "You're leaving me?" I nodded, calm and steady. "Yes, Daniel. I can't build a future on lies, and I refuse to let this betrayal define me any longer." His hands trembled as he picked up the papers, and for once, he didn't try to argue. He knew. Deep down, he knew this was the consequence of his choices. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I felt an unfamiliar sensation, peace. It wasn't joy, and it wasn't relief exactly, but it was the quiet strength of knowing I had taken my life back into my own hands. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I finally believed I could walk it without fear. In the weeks that followed, I learned that healing wasn't a straight road, but a winding, unpredictable journey. Some days, I would wake up feeling lighter, as though the burden had finally lifted off my chest, and I could breathe without choking on the memories of betrayal. Other days, the silence of my apartment felt deafening, and I would find myself staring at old photos, wondering how I had ever missed the warning signs. Yet through it all, one truth stood firm. I was no longer a prisoner of Daniel's lies or Emily's venom. I was free, and freedom, though lonely at times, was a gift I would never again take for granted. People in town whispered about them, often. Apparently, Daniel's attempt at launching a new business with Emily had gone up in flames within months. Investors pulled out after discovering the scandal attached to his name, and what little savings he had left bled away in debts. Emily, who had once thrived on pretending to be above everyone, was now seen storming out of shops, unable to pay bills, her arrogance stripped bare for all to see. I would be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that savored their downfall, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. They had mocked my worth, yet in the end, they destroyed each other. As for me, I didn't rush into another relationship. For the first time in years, I focused solely on myself. I traveled when I could, took art classes I had always put off, and even began journaling, a habit that slowly turned into something far more meaningful. That journal became the seed of my first book, a raw, unfiltered account of betrayal, survival, and self-discovery. When I finally shared it with the world, I was terrified of exposing my wounds, but the response shocked me. Strangers reached out, telling me my words had helped them leave toxic marriages, face betrayals, or find courage where they thought they had none. It was then I realized what Daniel and Emily had tried to break inside me had become my greatest weapon. My pain had transformed into purpose. One evening, nearly a year after the divorce, I walked past the cafe where it had all started. The place I once saw Emily betray me with my husband's embrace. I paused, staring through the window. Life had a strange way of circling back, of reminding us of wounds but also showing us how far we'd come. Inside, I saw a young woman laughing with a man, her eyes filled with the same naive trust I once carried. For a moment, my chest tightened, but then I smiled, because I knew better now. Love, if it ever found me again, would not be something I begged for, nor something built on deceit. It would have to be honest, steady, and real. Until then, I had myself, and that was enough. And so, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and the lights of the cafe flickered warmly, I turned away and walked home, not with bitterness in my heart, but with a quiet strength. Because betrayal may have shattered me once, but I had rebuilt myself into someone unbreakable. Daniel and Emily were my past. My future was mine alone to claim,